Hi, I'm here with Chris Pobletti at Together for the Gospel. How are you doing, Chris?
Good, good.
Good,
Thanks, Aaron.
good. We're talking about Chris's new book, The Two Fears:
Mhm.
Tremble Before God Alone. Just came out in April.
Um, well, I originally came up with the idea for this particular book when I was asked to teach at the young adult ministry, the church I attend, on this topic of the fear of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Studied, got into a certain text in First Peter chapter 1, uh, and just looking at different commentaries and different books, just searching throughout the library, I realized that there really aren't that many contemporary books on the fear of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of the best stuff on the topic was written back with the Puritans, Reformation, post Reformation eras, and there's a lot of good stuff. It
Mm-hmm.
was a very common topic. I mean, they didn't really have books, the Christian bookstores back then,
Yeah.
but if they did, you would see a lot of books on the fear of the Lord.
Yeah.
But you just don't see that anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and I, I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Proverbs and Psalms tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I think that implies that it's really important. Furthermore, in that passage in First Peter chapter 1, you
Mm-hmm.
got Peter writing to the elect exiles. Couldn't get any clearer that he's writing to Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on in the first chapter, he says, um, "Now, for those of you who call on the Father, who judges without partiality,
Mm-hmm.
live throughout the time of this exile that you have here in fear."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it says, "You do that because you know that you've been redeemed by the precious blood of the Lamb." So it's not only is the fear of God the beginning of wisdom, but it's also something that Christians ought to do continually,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we just don't talk about it
Yeah,
anymore. So
to the book.
okay,
And I actually had a comment from someone who was saying that fear is something that is thoroughly anti-Christian,
hmm,
that it's anti-gospel. How would you respond to that?
yeah, I'd say it certainly isn't. I'm imagine that the reason that person says that is because there are scriptures that say, "Fear not."
Mm-hmm.
Perfect love casts out fear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then again, I mean, I already mentioned these texts, but it says that it is also this fear. It is this godly fear is the beginning of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we as Christians are supposed to do throughout the time of our exile.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with this weightiness, this sense of reverence and
Mm-hmm.
awe that uh, certainly our God is worthy of,
Mm-hmm.
that glorifies Him.
Yeah.
Um, I think that there is a kind of fear that is unholy,
Mm-hmm.
and that is any kind of fear that does not honor God,
Mm-hmm.
that does not recognize His power over us as the one true and living God.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is a kind of fear that is holy,
Mm-hmm.
it is godly,
Yeah.
and it's the fear of the Lord, the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of wisdom. It's
Yeah.
kind of where they got the two fears.
Which we'll experience through it. What do you hope that God will
Yeah.
teach them?
Well, I think I think largely, if you just look at just a general landscape of evangelicalism, I think that a lot of Christians are just afraid to touch the topic,
Mm-hmm.
afraid to touch this idea of godly fear and reverence. Case in point, that comment that you told me about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so here's my goal: is that we wouldn't be afraid to
Mm-hmm.
talk about fear.
Yeah.
Um, that there is a fear that is unholy, there is a fear that is holy,
Mm-hmm.
um, godly fear,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a fear to be commended.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that recognizes. Um, in the book, my working definition is that I say that when we fear something, we give credence to or we
Mm-hmm.
recognize the power of that thing's uh,
Mm-hmm.
that thing over us.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about the fear of the Lord, it's like we're recognizing, we're giving credence to the power of God over us. Um, and so when we say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, we recognize God's power over us. It just gives us a high view of His majesty, His sovereignty, and really His grace is all the more astounding and amplified and scandalous when we see it in light of the weightiness of God in His character, in His attributes, in His goodness, and in His mercy.
Wonderful.